I've been playing through Animal Well, and I came across a new gaming term I hadn't heard before: Metroidvania. I find it ironic that the name of the genre itself is like something you would find in a Metroidvania, a word that makes no sense unless you've discovered the mental keys to decipher it. So what is that word, Metroidvania, anyway? Well, as many of you know, it comes from the term Metroidvania. Here's an example of a Metroidvania distilled to its most basic elements. You start with nothing, and much of the map is blocked off.
Bummer.
But you're able to pick up the flippers, which allow you to swim and grab the ice skates, allowing you to walk on ice and get the fire boots. And lastly, the suction cup boots. As you get more items, more of the map is unlocked, and eventually you're able to reach your goal. Of course, you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who considers Chip's Challenge to be a classic Metroidvania game. Although Metroidvania titles can have items similar to the flippers, which allow passage through a hazard, most Metroidvania items are movement-based. Navigate downward through an intricate one-way maze, then get a wall-climbing ability at the end so you can get out. Before long, you'll find something like a double jump, or a glide, or a charge, expanding your movement even further, and allowing you to travel farther, higher, or faster. The maps are generally far more expansive as well, with rooms that loop back on each other so that when you find that special item you were looking for, backtracking is reduced. And when you do make it back to those early rooms, you may find a ledge that was once impossible to reach, or a corridor filled with spikes you had previously dismissed that's suddenly accessible with your new abilities, leading to fresh areas or hidden upgrades. And that's where most of the enjoyment comes from in a Metroidvania game: the realization that a once insurmountable problem is now solvable. A strange detail in the background is suddenly a useful part of the level. It can be particularly satisfying to practice those movement abilities and chain them together. Sometimes you can feel so overpowered and reach such extreme places, you almost feel like you're getting away with stuff the devs hadn't intended. Now, Metroidvania games are typically synonymous with 2D platforming adventures. In an alternate universe where Metroidvania was considered a broader genre, people could categorize something like, say, the traditional 3D Zelda games as Metroidvania games, since they gate progress in the world based on certain items, and they also reward backtracking with hidden areas after more items are obtained. Metroidvania games, however, tend to cover a far wider range of genres. Puzzle games, 2D platformers, Zelda games, walking simulators. The surface gameplay between these games seems pretty varied, but it's the gameplay lurking underneath that unites these under one genre. Rather than just giving you physical keys or upgrades to the character, the keys in these games are nuggets of knowledge you've learned about the rules of that world. Greater understandings to help you...
Do you want to know what it is?
Okay, so you're right. Let's dive into some examples here, but we have to warn you.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
And this isn't just some bit. Metroidvania games are, by their very definition, best experienced knowing as little about them as possible. I'm going to be careful when I talk about these games, alright? I won't be talking about anything that would ruin the experience for a first-timer, so you should feel free to watch on. But if a game intrigues you, I encourage you to pause the video, leave a like and a sub, and come back when you're ready. Because when you hear people say things like, I wish I could erase my memory of this so I could do it again for the first time, these are the experiences they're talking about.
I don't want to remember nothing. Nothing. You understand?
I think most people would agree that the pinnacle of this genre is Outer Wilds. Essentially, you're a space explorer stuck in a time loop. It's up to you to figure out what's going on and how to fix it. One of this game's most notable features is the absence of any progress gates whatsoever. You know, when you want to go through a locked door but you haven't found the key yet. In Outer Wilds, if you have those knowledge keys, meaning you understand the rules of the universe, what happened and why, you can wake up, do what you need to do, you can beat the game in about 10 minutes. I'm sure we've all wished we could do what Bill Murray does in this scene here from Groundhog Day, saying the perfect combination of things to get that exact outcome you want. And that's exactly what Outer Wilds allows you to do in that final loop.
I'm a god. I'm not the god.
I don't think.
Unfortunately, this is a bit of a double-edged sword because it completely tanks the game's replayability, making for a game with one of the best first playthroughs ever and one of the blandest second playthroughs ever. There's still fun things you can do in the game just to goof around. I, for one, really enjoy the physics of the spacecraft, and trying to manually land on the sun station is a fun challenge. But at the end of the day, the real reason why you fell in love with the game, those revelations about the universe, the realization of what you have to do, and the cost of doing it, those epiphanies can never be experienced again. A game that balances replayability and revelations more evenly is The Witness. A big part of the game is also discovering the nature and rules of the world, but once you figure out the rules, the majority of the gameplay is just straight up doing puzzles. The other half of the game is completing the obelisks, and although these don't have replayability the same way the main puzzles do, you can still get a similar effect just by marathoning the game for 6 hours and then taking a walk outside. In a way, the obelisks are just training your mind to think that way anyway. I can tell you firsthand, The Witness is far more replayable than Outer Wilds. I've 100%ed it at least 10 times. Being available on phones makes it a great train or bus game, and for PC, there's a randomizer mod that basically gives this game infinite replayability, although the Metroidvania aspects of the experience will have long faded away by that point. Return of the Obra Dinn is a good example of what a Metroidvania is not. In the game, you deduce the names and fates of the 60 people once aboard the Obra Dinn. I love this game, and I'd recommend it to anyone. But the things you learn throughout your journey are not mechanical in nature. You might learn new ways to identify people that you hadn't thought of when you first started.
My goodness, what an idea. Why didn't I think of that? Hammocks!
But those revelations don't unlock new areas or anything like that, they just fill out the book. Progress is dictated by which vignettes you've watched, not your knowledge of game mechanics. Replayability can be a bit of a slog with Obra Dinn as well, but for the exact opposite reason as Outer Wilds: too many progress gates. It's worth saying that not every game needs to have replayability. I wouldn't change a thing about Outer Wilds or Obra Dinn, and I think they completely accomplished what they set out to do. But when games as special as these come along, you want to have a reason to revisit them. I guess therein lies the question for aspiring devs looking to make their own Metroidvania. How do you make your game worth revisiting while still keeping the magic intact from that first playthrough? The answer is, you don't go full Metroidvania. I think one game that manages to capture this really well is Fez, or as my daughter calls it, Paper Towel Man. The game at its core is a 2D platformer. At least, it's what you spend the majority of your time doing. So going back and replaying it for that gameplay is a good enough reason. But the Metroidvania elements of the game are extremely memorable, and the puzzles are complex enough that if you return to the game after a few years, you'll be getting out your pen and paper all over again. The starting area alone has so many little details for people who understand those hidden mechanics. Rooms hidden from the original 2D plane are barren, walls contain secret information that only someone with a fez could see, things that seemed like set dressings are actually meticulously detailed puzzles hidden in plain sight. It's great. That being said, one of the biggest flaws Fez has is that despite having the knowledge to continue, some of those codes and secret messages you're looking for to apply your knowledge are only visible with the sunglasses, which are only obtainable after completing a playthrough on that save. In other words, without using external guides, you have to complete the bad ending to get the good ending. The sunglasses introduce an unnecessary progress gate. If there were some way to get the sunglasses early, either through finding them in a chest or obtaining a certain amount of anti-cubes, I think it would make the whole experience smoother for players who already have those knowledge keys unlocked in their mind. You know, something to think about for the release of Fez 2. Now this is something that Tunic, a very similar game to Fez in its Metroidvania elements, manages to rectify. Just like in Fez, you need to gather every piece of a MacGuffin to get the true ending. But here, it's possible to complete just using the knowledge you get along the way. You choose the bad ending or the good ending, you aren't forced to do one to get the other. Just like how Fez front-loads a lot of its 2D platformer elements, Tunic front-loads a lot of its Zelda elements, then reveals its Metroidvania secrets in the back end. And like any good Metroidvania game, you had that power within you the whole time, even if you start a new save. And that unlocked knowledge adds additional depth to a second playthrough. And that's mostly where I think Animal Well resides as well. Just like how Tunic is a Zelda game with a Metroidvania undercurrent, or Fez is a 2D platformer with a Metroidvania undercurrent, Animal Well is a front-loaded Metroidvania with a Metroidvania undercurrent. In fact, Animal Well leans far more heavily into the Vania than the Brainia. Even in the first few hours, this has some hardcore jumping in it that is manageable for a pro gamer, such as myself, but that I wouldn't dare recommend to most people I know. Many of the puzzles in this game don't involve secret codes or languages, but are skill-testing movement challenges, closer to something you might find with the strawberries and secret hearts in Celeste. Based on the buzz surrounding this game, I was expecting something even closer to Tunic, where the controls have hidden uses, and then you get additional items as you go. Although there are Easter eggs in Animal Well that can turn you into the fox from Tunic or Gomez from Fez, that's nothing like the gameplay impact of Tunic's Cross. Rather, I think Animal Well starts you off with absolutely nothing, no secret moves at all, and then the items you get each have special secrets. Some of these secrets are surface level, perhaps even taught to you during gameplay, whereas other secrets are obtuse enough that you'd be more likely to learn about it on a community forum. Which brings me to the final aspect of the Metroidvania genre, and perhaps the most controversial: community collaboration. All of the Metroidvania games I've mentioned so far have had some sort of community collaboration associated with them. I mean, hey, if a game is about finding secrets, it's perfectly natural for people to want to share those secrets with each other and see if they missed anything, or search for major secrets together. On the more innocent end of the spectrum, we've got something like The Witness. If you were stuck in a room with no internet and you couldn't leave until you 100%ed The Witness, you could probably do it. Most of the community collaboration with that game comes with the non-gameplay related aspects, like the philosophy surrounding the game, the various visual Easter eggs, stuff like that. Where it starts to get controversial is when certain gameplay secrets require community collaboration to be completed. Of the games I covered in this video, Fez is definitely the most guilty here. There's this block puzzle which requires you to spell out a certain word, but the solution is extremely obtuse and requires like a corkboard. I mean, seriously, if anyone got this without a guide or help, I'd love to know. The other offending puzzle is this stupid monolith which literally has no solution. Basically what happened was the answer was brute forced by the community a day after the game's release, and to this day, the devs won't reveal the intended way the puzzle should be solved. Who knows, perhaps it was an ARG that was cancelled after the solution was brute forced, but, whatever. A puzzle with no solution after 10 years, that's not a mystery, it's just a bad puzzle. I say this because Fez is a game that's otherwise full of great mysteries. You've got things like a secret message on the wall that leads to the coordinates of a triangular field in real life, or the soundtrack with a series of deliberately chosen images hidden in the audio, or these squares, these concentric squares hidden on the floor, one of which requires development tools to even see. I mean, these are great mysteries. Are they Easter eggs? Are they for the monolith? Are they just an elaborate troll? I mean, come on, man, it's been 10 years. Give us something.
No.
Curses and cranberries!
My biggest argument against puzzles requiring community collaboration is just how poorly solutions age. When the game first comes out and you realize you need help on a puzzle and you search online and you realize, oh my god, no one has solved this yet, and what? People are working together to solve it? I mean, that's an incredible rush. And for the 50 or so people who solve it together for the first time, it must be one of the greatest highs of their lives, an unforgettable experience. For the hundreds of thousands of people who come after, it's nothing more than following a tutorial on a forum post. And don't tell me you're not going to read that post. For someone to solve it fresh years later, they'd have to look it up, see that the puzzle has been solved and requires people to work together, then intentionally hide all mentions of the solution, find a group of intelligent people who are also willing to hide all mentions of the solution and work with you, and then solve it. It's just not gonna happen. And in my opinion, it completely goes against the philosophy of a Metroidvania, because you're being robbed of the epiphany. You have to look up a guide. I don't think community collaboration is bad. I just think that if you're going to have puzzles in your game that require outside help, you need to find a way to signal that to the player in some way. Animal Well is not nearly as guilty of this as a game like Fez, but I think it's a problem developers should think about for people who prefer not to use a guide and then are left frustrated when they're unable to get the true ending. You can help me achieve my true ending by liking and subscribing. I'm a small part-time creator who would love to have more time in the day to make videos. Liking, subscribing, and sharing helps me to do that. And if you want to share your experience with any of these lovely games, or if you have a better name to replace Metroidvania, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.